Let me paint a clearer picture of what things were like before everything fell apart. I'm Jack, 45 years old, and my wife, Sarah, is 44. We've been together for 23 years, married for the majority of that time, and we have a wonderful daughter named Mia. She's just about to finish her last semester of college, and honestly, I couldn't be more proud of her. Mia has always been a bright light in my life, smart, driven, and determined to make a real impact. She's studying to become a teacher with a focus on math, and I have no doubt she's going to be amazing at it. As for me, I grew up in a quiet town in Texas where life centered around the ranch. My days were filled with working on the family property, going to school, playing sports, and catching the occasional rodeo. After high school, I decided to study agriculture, hoping to teach others about the life I knew, farming, ranching, and everything that came with it. My family wasn't wealthy, so I balanced school with part-time jobs to get by. It wasn't easy, but it was the kind of work I'd always known. Then, in my final semester of college, everything changed in ways I couldn't have imagined. My parents, who had spent their lives building the ranch, decided to sell it and retire. They moved to a modest house in town, ready for a quieter life. But before they could even settle in, disaster struck. On their way back from my graduation, they were killed in a car accident. Just like that, they were gone, and everything they'd worked for was suddenly my responsibility. As their only child, I inherited the proceeds from the ranch's sale, around $400,000. I was completely blindsided. They'd never mentioned the exact amount, and I had no idea they'd saved so much. While the money was a blessing, it didn't even come close to easing the pain of losing them so suddenly. Those next few months were some of the hardest I've ever faced. Trying to grieve and move forward felt impossible, but I knew I had no choice but to keep going. By August, I was starting to piece my life back together. I took a job teaching agricultural science at a high school just outside of Austin, and with my inheritance, I bought a 25-acre ranch on the outskirts of town. I threw myself into building a life there, putting up a modern log cabin, a horse barn, a training ring, and even investing in cattle to bring the ranch back to life. At the time, I wasn't actively seeking a partner, but deep down, I knew I wanted someone to share my world with. I wanted a family, a future, but I wasn't in a hurry. That's when Sarah came into my life. About a month into the school year, my mentor teacher set me up with her, saying she was perfect for me. I wasn't sure at first. Blind dates were never my thing, but when Sarah opened the door, I was completely taken aback. She was stunning, the kind of beautiful that made me forget how to speak. Our first date was effortless. We had dinner, shared a few drinks, and talked for hours. By the end of the night, we were sitting on her balcony, and I found myself wondering how someone like her could still be single. When I asked, she didn't hold back. Most of the men I've dated have been selfish or worse, she admitted. But you're different, Jack. There's something about you. I felt the same way. When we kissed that night, it was soft and tentative, like we were both afraid to mess up whatever was just beginning to form. I told her I wanted to take things slow, to really get to know each other before diving into anything serious. She smiled and said, "You're one of the rare ones, Jack. Most guys wouldn't think twice about rushing things." From that moment, things moved quickly. Sarah came from a modest background where college wasn't an option for her, so she went through vocational training and built a career as a secretary for a small business in Austin. She was independent, hardworking, and I admired that about her. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. Our first intimate moment came after a movie, in the front seat of my truck. It was intense and passionate, a memory I'll never forget. From that night on, we were fully committed. By March, Sarah had moved in with me, and by June, we were married. A little over a year later, Mia came into our lives, and for 23 years, we built what I thought was a happy, fulfilling family. We weren't wealthy, but we had what we needed, and for the most part, life was good. Sarah was passionate and fiery, especially when it came to our private moments, and I always appreciated that about her. Even after all these years together, our spark never seemed to fade. Or at least that's what I believed. But over the last 6 months, things started to shift. Sarah had taken a new job as the executive secretary to the CEO of BRB Enterprises, And while I attributed her growing distance to stress from her new role, something just didn't sit right. First, I ignored it. I trusted her. But now, looking back, I realize I should have listened to my gut. Her new job sounded like a great opportunity. She'd been hired by Benjamin Mitchell, the owner of a successful manufacturing firm specializing in high-end electronics for government contracts. The man was clearly wealthy, and from the way Sarah spoke about him, his business was thriving. She would often tell me how much she loved her job and how professional Benjamin was. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as her admiration for him grew, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in my chest. That feeling only worsened the first time I met him. Benjamin Mitchell was 58, balding, and the kind of guy who radiated wealth without any of the hard work that should have come with it. Standing next to him, I felt like a guy out of place, like I was in the wrong room entirely. When I jokingly asked Sarah what she found so impressive about him, she laughed and reassured me in that familiar sweet tone of hers. "Oh, Jack, no one could ever compare to you, babe," she said, flashing me that smile I'd always loved. Her words, and the affection she showed me in our private moments, helped calm my nerves for a little while. But then the business trips started. At first, the trips were rare, just a day or two here and there. But gradually, they started happening more often, stretching into 2- or 3-day affairs. When I asked her about them, she brushed it off, claiming it was just part of her job. "Benjamin's got a lot on his plate, and I need to be there to handle all the details," she'd explain with that confident tone of hers. She reassured me that they always stayed in separate accommodations and that the trips were strictly professional. Sarah always seemed so self-assured, so logical. I had no reason to question her. So I let it go. That is, until one Friday. A day I'll never forget. I had just gotten home from teaching and went straight to the barn, like I usually did, to clear my head and spend some time with the horses. About an hour later, Sarah pulled into the driveway, returning from yet another 3-day trip. I walked out to meet her, feeling that familiar sense of excitement. I thought maybe I'd cook us some steaks for dinner, something simple to unwind after her trip. But when she stepped out of the car, I immediately noticed something was off. She looked tired, distant, and barely gave me a nod before heading inside. There was something in her posture, in the way she carried herself, that felt cold. When I joined her inside, I grabbed a beer from the fridge and asked if she wanted one too, or maybe a glass of wine. She barely looked at me and mumbled that wine would be nice, but her eyes stayed glued to the floor. It was like she couldn't face me, and I could feel the tension thick in the air. I poured her a glass and set the bottle next to her. Finally, she looked up at me, and I saw the anxiety etched across her face. After a brief kiss and a half-hearted hug, I asked her what was wrong. "You seem upset, Sarah. Did something happen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though I could already feel the unease settling in my chest. Without answering, she drained her glass in one swift motion and poured another. Her movements were quick and sharp, betraying an inner storm she could no longer conceal. I tried to comfort her, telling her that whatever it was, we'd get through it together. "It can't be that bad," I said, hoping she'd open up. She let out a long sigh, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the glass. Then she finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Jack, I need you to listen. Don't interrupt me, please. I need to say this." My stomach dropped. I could tell, even before the words came out, that my world was about to shatter. "I love you, Jack. I really do. You've been the most amazing husband, father, and friend. But this isn't about you being a bad person. You've done nothing wrong." Her words were kind, almost too kind, but they hit me like a knife. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue, though my mind was already racing ahead. "I've decided to file for divorce," she said bluntly. "I'm leaving tonight. Your suspicions about Benjamin and me? They're true. We've been having an affair for 5 months now. He's in love with me, and…" She paused, clearly searching for the right words. "I've chosen to be with him. Once the divorce is final, we plan to get married." Her words hit me like a freight train. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But she wasn't done. I'll leave everything to you, the house, the ranch, all our things. I'll only take my clothes and personal items. I don't want this to get messy, Jack. Let's just keep it simple. I stared at her, feeling an intense mix of anger and disbelief bubbling under the surface. Go ahead, I said, my voice even, though every part of me was screaming. Do whatever you need to do. Sarah continued, unfazed. I'll file on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. It doesn't have to get ugly. I just want this to be over quickly. Finally, she stopped, giving me the chance to speak. I took a breath, trying to keep my composure despite the storm raging inside me. Do you love him? I asked, my voice steady, though I could feel the raw emotion just beneath the surface. I respect him, she said, her voice faltering. He's intriguing. Maybe in time I'll love him. Does he satisfy you more than I do? I asked, though I wasn't sure I even wanted to know the answer. Was I not enough for you, Sarah? She shook her head quickly, almost desperately. No, Jack. You've always been incredible. You've always satisfied me. This isn't about that. Then why? I pressed, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. Why are you throwing everything away? Our family, our marriage, our life. Sarah sighed again, staring down at her wine glass. Benjamin, he treats me like I'm his queen. He buys me extravagant gifts, promises me a life of luxury. Fancy cars, world travel, designer clothes, fine dining. It's a life I never thought I'd have, and he wants me to share it with him. I felt a cold bitterness rise in me. So it's about money then, I said, my voice sharp. You're leaving me for a guy with a bigger bank account. There's a word for women like that, Sarah. It starts with A. Her face crumpled, and tears welled up in her eyes. It's not like that, Jack, she said, her voice breaking. I never wanted to hurt you, but I can't pass up this chance. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, the mother of my child, and I felt my heart crack wide open. Sarah, you have no idea how much pain you've caused me, I said, my voice heavy with grief. I gave you everything. 23 years of love, sacrifice, and loyalty. I thought we had a good life. But clearly, it wasn't enough for you. I apologized, though I didn't mean it. I told her I needed time alone to think. I walked out to the barn, sat on a bale of hay, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. The weight of her betrayal was suffocating, and it was all I could do to keep from breaking down. The anger, the grief, the confusion. It all hit me at once. And, for the first time in years, the tears came, rolling down my face as I sat there in the barn. Alone. I almost didn't recognize myself. I'd been raised to believe that men don't cry, that real men keep their emotions in check. But in that moment, all of that went out the window. My heart was shattered, and I couldn't hold back the flood of emotions any longer. I asked myself all the questions I couldn't answer. What did I do wrong? Was this my fault? Could I have changed something? Each one felt like a dagger through my chest. And then, through all the pain, one thought cut through everything. This would be the last time Sarah would ever bring me to tears. That realization, as strange as it sounds, gave me a small bit of comfort, even in the midst of my devastation. Sarah must have sensed something. A few minutes later, she walked into the barn, stopping when she saw me sitting there. Her face twisted in shock as she took in my tears. "Oh my God, Jack," she said, her voice trembling. "What have I done? I've never seen you cry before. Have I hurt you that much?" Her words were full of regret, but they only fueled the fire of my anger. At first, the trips were rare, just a day or two here and there. Then, they became more frequent, stretching into 2 or 3 day stays. Every time I asked about them, Sarah would brush it off, saying it was just part of her job. "Benjamin's got a lot on his plate. I need to be there to take care of the details," she'd explain. She always sounded so confident and reasonable, and I had no reason not to trust her. So I let it go. That is, until one Friday, a day I'll never forget. I'd just gotten home from teaching and went straight to the barn, as usual, to clear my head. About an hour later, Sarah pulled into the driveway, back from yet another trip. I walked out to greet her, eager to spend some time together and maybe cook up some steaks for dinner. She stepped out of the car, looking tired, and gave me a quick nod before heading inside. Something about her felt off, distant. I followed her inside and grabbed a beer from the fridge, offering her a drink. "Beer or wine?" I asked. She asked for wine, but her eyes stayed downcast, avoiding mine. The tension in the air was palpable. I poured her a glass, set it in front of her, and waited. Finally, she looked up, and I could see the worry in her face. After a quick kiss and a half-hearted hug, I asked, "What's wrong, Sarah? You look upset. Did something happen?" Without answering, she drained the glass in one go and poured another. It was clear now, whatever it was, she wasn't ready to hide it any longer. I tried to comfort her, telling her that whatever it was, we'd deal with it together. "It can't be that bad, right?" I said, trying to ease her into talking. She sighed deeply, her hands shaking slightly as she held her glass. "Jack," she started, her voice thick with emotion. "I need you to listen to me. Please don't interrupt. I have to say this." I felt my stomach drop. Even before the words left her mouth, I knew everything was about to change. "I love you, Jack," she said, voice breaking. "I love you with all my heart. But this isn't about you being a bad husband or father or friend. You've been incredible." The warmth in her words only made the knife twist deeper. I stayed silent, waiting for her to continue. "I've decided to file for divorce," she said flatly. "I'm leaving tonight. Benjamin and we've been having an affair for 5 months now. We're in love, and once the divorce is final, we're getting married." The shock hit me like a physical blow. But she wasn't finished. "I'll leave everything to you, the house, the ranch, everything. I'll only take my clothes and personal things. I don't want this to get ugly, Jack. I just want it to be over quickly." I stared at her, my chest tight. "Go ahead," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Once you walk out that door, it's over. Don't come crawling back when this blows up in your face. And make sure you keep your sugar daddy happy tonight." For a moment I thought she might hesitate, maybe rethink her decision. But instead, she just said, "Goodbye, Jack. I love you, and I'll miss you." I barely managed to reply, "I love you too, Sarah," and then she was gone. I sat there in the silence, unable to process it all. Eventually, I walked out to the barn, my mind racing, my heart heavy. I stood by the horses for a while, their quiet presence a small comfort. "Well, ladies," I muttered, trying to smile through the pain. "Looks like you're the only loyal ones left." I patted their necks, finding some small peace in their simple, unconditional companionship. When I went back inside, I grabbed another beer and collapsed on the couch. The loneliness hit hard. About an hour later, my phone buzzed. It was Mia. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "Mom called me. Has she completely lost it? What is she even thinking? She's hooked up with a sugar daddy?" I replied, bitterness creeping into my voice. "She thinks his money will make her happy. It's pathetic." "That's garbage, Dad," Mia shot back. "She actually tried to convince me that he'd be a great stepdad. Promised me a new car and said he'd pay off my loans. I told her to shove that car where the sun doesn't shine." I couldn't help but laugh, genuine laughter, the first in a long while. "Good girl," I said, feeling a little lighter. We talked for a while longer, and her support helped ease the weight on my chest. By the time we hung up, I felt a flicker of hope. After a few more beers, I dozed off on the couch, but my sleep was restless. I had unsettling dreams, one of which I couldn't shake. In it, I walked into a women's dressing room at a mall and found Sarah with Benjamin. She saw me, laughed, and went right back to it without a hint of shame. The whole scene was so absurd, even in the dream, that it almost made me laugh. Benjamin wasn't exactly impressive in any sense of the word, which just made the whole thing more surreal. I woke up feeling disgusted and angry all over again. The next morning, I was nursing my coffee when my phone buzzed again. It was Luke, my old college roommate and one of my closest friends. We'd kept in touch over the years, but it had been a couple of months since we last talked. "Jack, how you holding up, man?" Luke asked after exchanging pleasantries. I hesitated. "Honestly, not great," I admitted. "Sarah left me yesterday. She's filing for divorce and ran off with some rich guy." Luke's tone shifted. "Jack, I need to see you. I'm in town and it's important. Can I come over?" His urgency surprised me. "How did you know about Sarah leaving me?" I asked, suspicious. "I didn't," he said quickly. "But I have something to tell you. It's complicated, and I think you need to hear it." Curiosity piqued, I agreed to meet him. About 30 minutes later, Luke arrived. We settled on the back deck with our coffee, the morning air cool and calm, but I could tell from his serious expression that this wasn't just a casual catch-up. "Jack, I hate to be the one to tell you this," Luke began, his voice grave, "but I'm working on a case involving Benjamin Mitchell." I froze. "What case?" "This is official business," he said, his tone serious. "We suspect Benjamin's been committing large-scale fraud with government contracts, maybe embezzling millions. If everything pans out, he's facing serious trouble." The news hit me like a wave. "That's unbelievable," I said, stunned. "I can't stand that guy. It'll serve Sarah right when this all comes crashing down." Luke nodded, his face serious. "But there's more. Since Sarah works for him, she's become a person of interest in our investigation." My stomach dropped. "Are you saying Sarah's involved in this?" Luke held up a hand. "We're not sure yet. We're still gathering information. But I felt you needed to know. There's no evidence that she knows about his crimes." Luke continued, his voice low, as though the weight of what he was saying carried a cautionary undertone. "But once everything falls apart, she's going to get swept up in the aftermath. Right now, she thinks she's found a rich, doting husband and a life of luxury. But when it all unravels, she's in for a very rude awakening." As he spoke, Luke reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope, tossing it onto the table in front of me. "Here's all the evidence of their affair, if you want to use it in your divorce. But remember, if anyone asks, you didn't get this from me." I hesitated for a moment before opening the envelope. Inside, there were several 8x10 photos, printed emails, and even explicit videos. Each piece a clear indication of Sarah's relationship with Benjamin. The timestamps and dates showed this had been going on for months. The sight of it hit me like a physical blow. It was hard to look at, but I made myself push through it. One detail stood out that felt almost too ironic. In the close-up shots, Sarah didn't appear to be enjoying herself at all. Her expressions seemed forced, mechanical. I knew what she looked like when she was genuinely passionate, and this wasn't it. Even in betrayal, she was faking it. Another laughable detail hit me. Luke's earlier observation about Benjamin's physical shortcomings was spot on. The guy wasn't exactly impressive. The absurdity of it all would have been almost comical if it weren't so tragic. Luke broke the silence by glancing at his watch. "I've got to get going," he said, standing up. "I'll be in town for a couple of days, but D-Day for Mitchell is coming soon. We're almost there." "Luke," I said, shaking his hand, "let me take you to dinner tomorrow night. It's the least I can do after everything you've done for me." "Sounds good," Luke replied, pausing for a moment. "Actually, my sister Grace is in town. Mind if she joins us?" I smiled. "Not at all. Last time I saw her, she was 13, with braces and pigtails. She's what, 36 now? I hear she turned out stunning." Luke grinned. "She's a corporate lawyer now, just finalized her divorce. Apparently, she caught her husband in bed with his secretary. Sounds like you two might have a bit in common these days." "Small world," I muttered, shaking my head. "I'd love to meet her again and maybe get her advice on finding a good divorce attorney." "Perfect," Luke said. "She's opening a new office here and knows her way around family law. I'll set it up." The next evening, I met Luke and Grace at a local Mexican restaurant. Luke hadn't exaggerated, Grace was stunning. She greeted me with a warm hug and a kiss on the cheek. "Jack," she said, her eyes sparkling. "The last time I saw you, you were teasing me about my braces." I laughed. guilty as charged. But look at you now. One of the most beautiful women I've ever met. Guess I can't tease you anymore. She giggled, clearly enjoying the banter. We chatted easily, and over dinner, she filled me in on her career while Luke brought her up to speed on my situation. We'll keep everything confidential, Grace assured me. But Jack, you need to go on the offensive here. I know an excellent family lawyer who specializes in infidelity cases. She's a bulldog in court and helped me take my ex-husband to the cleaners. Grace pulled out her phone. I have her card back at my hotel. Let's grab it after dinner and get the ball rolling. You should serve Sarah as soon as she gets back from Paris. Her confidence was infectious, and I found myself admiring her sharp wit and take-charge attitude. As dinner wound down, Luke got a work call and had to leave. I insisted on covering the bill, and Grace and I lingered over the last of our margaritas. The night's still young, she said with a mischievous smile. How about some dancing? I didn't hesitate. There's a place nearby. Let's go. For the next 2 hours we danced, drank beer, and laughed like old friends. The connection between us was electric, and for the first time in weeks, I felt truly at ease. By the time we returned to her hotel to grab the lawyer's card, the evening had taken on a life of its own. In her room, she handed me the card and gave me firm instructions. Call her tomorrow, she said. She'll be expecting you. I nodded. Grace, I don't know how to thank you. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto mine. You could start with this, she said, leaning in and kissing me passionately. I didn't resist. Her arms wrapped around me, and we moved to the bed, where the kiss deepened into something more. For a few minutes, nothing else existed but her warmth and the comfort of feeling wanted again. When we finally pulled away, breathless, we shared a smile. As we paused, I couldn't help but confess, Grace, I've wanted to kiss you since the moment I saw you yesterday. Her face lit up with a smile. Well, Jack, I've been thinking the same about you. You're handsome, kind, and frankly, a breath of fresh air. That was all the encouragement I needed. We resumed kissing, the passion between us growing stronger. Our hands began to explore each other, and I felt her touch through my jeans. My body responded immediately, but just as my hands slipped under her blouse, I stopped. Grace, I said, catching my breath, maybe we should slow down. I don't want to take advantage of you, especially since your divorce is so recent. I want to make sure this is what you want. She tilted her head, her smile never wavering. Jack, I'm a grown woman. I know what I want, and I'm here because I'm deeply attracted to you. If anything, I might be the one taking advantage of you. Her honesty disarmed me, and I couldn't help but laugh. As we lay on the bed, she shared a moment of vulnerability. You know, she said softly, when I first found out about my ex's affair, I blamed myself. I wondered if I wasn't enough, if there was something wrong with me. But over time, I realized it wasn't my fault. I'm smart, confident, and attractive. His betrayal was his weakness, not mine. She paused, looking at me with deep sincerity. I hope you don't blame yourself for what Sarah did. It wasn't you, Jack. You didn't fail her. She made her choices. Her words hit me like a wave. For the first time in a long while, I began to understand that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't to blame for any of this. I admitted to Grace that I'd been wrestling with the same doubts, questioning whether I was a bad husband, incapable of giving Sarah what she needed. But spending time with you tonight, I said, has reminded me that I was a good husband, father, and partner. Sarah's choices don't reflect who I am. We spent the rest of the evening mostly cuddling, the quiet comfort of her presence settling my frayed emotions. The next morning, I woke up with Grace still in my arms, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a kind of peace. Over breakfast, I invited her to join me for lunch and horseback riding at the ranch. She readily agreed, and we spent the day together. Grace had an effortless way with the horses, and watching her laugh and connect with them lifted my spirits in ways I hadn't expected. Later, we ended up on the couch. The air between us charged again, but this time we took things slow. A deep kiss, hands wandering, but nothing more. It felt right to let the connection build naturally. There was no rush. By Monday, I was ready to face the divorce head-on. I met with Emily, the lawyer Grace had recommended. She was sharp, no nonsense, and didn't mince words. "We'll file for divorce on the grounds of infidelity and abandonment," Emily said bluntly. She laid out the plan. I would keep the house, the ranch, and most of our assets. The $10,000 in savings would be split evenly, but the money in our checking account would remain mine. Since Sarah's car and credit cards were already in her name, they would stay with her. Emily also advised canceling her car and health insurance immediately, and we would only use the explicit photos and videos if absolutely necessary. When Emily asked when Sarah was expected back from Paris, I replied, "Thursday morning," handing over the forwarding address Sarah had left for mail. "We'll serve the papers as soon as she's back," Emily assured me. Thursday morning came, and at around 10:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Sarah. Her voice was sharp, confusion and frustration simmering just below the surface. "Jack, why did I just get divorce papers?" she demanded. "I thought we agreed you'd file for divorce." "I never agreed to anything, Sarah," I replied, my tone calm but firm. "I'm just helping you get what you wanted quickly." Her voice rose. "Infidelity and abandonment? We can just say irreconcilable differences. There's no need for all of this. We can adjust the wording, but let's not pretend this wasn't your doing," I responded flatly. "You made it clear you wanted this." Sarah sighed, the sound a mix of exasperation and resignation. "Look, Jack, I'll have Benjamin's lawyer review the updated papers. If he approves, I'll sign them." Emily wasn't surprised by this turn of events. She quickly revised the documents, noting that Benjamin's lawyer, a corporate attorney with little experience in divorce law, would likely encourage Sarah to sign without much resistance. As expected, by Friday afternoon, the signed papers were back in Emily's office. I stopped by after work to add my signature. The divorce would be finalized in 60 days. That evening, I called Grace to thank her for all her help and invited her to dinner near her new office. We had a quiet, pleasant evening together. She could sense I needed to decompress, and she was a great listener, offering support without pressing me for more than I was ready to share. We agreed to save anything more intimate for Saturday night. Later that night, Sarah called me again. This time, her tone was softer, almost tentative. She asked how I was holding up and admitted she no longer had the right to use terms of endearment with me. "I just want to know if you're okay," she said, her voice carrying a mixture of guilt and concern. I was measured, firm. "Sarah, I'll survive," I said plainly. "What you did hurt more deeply than I can express. But at this point, it doesn't matter. You made your choice. You got what you wanted, and unfortunately, I wasn't it." Sarah's voice cracked. "Jack, I never meant to hurt you. I still love you. I always will." Her words rang hollow, and I didn't let myself soften. "Sarah, love means nothing without loyalty and respect. And you threw both of those away long ago." I then outlined the practical details of our settlement. "I'll be canceling your car and health insurance by next Friday. That should give you enough time to get your own coverage in place." She thanked me quietly, adding, "Benjamin will take care of everything." "I'm not worried," I replied, my voice terse. "I just wanted you to know." As the conversation wound down, Sarah lingered. "I hope you don't think I'm a terrible person for what I've done. I had to follow what I thought was right for me at the time. I still love you, Jack. I'll always love you." Her words stirred something in me, but I kept it in check. "Goodbye, Sarah," I said, my voice steady. "I hope your new life works out." I hung up before she could say anything more, feeling a strange mix of finality and regret. It was time to move forward. Grace was a big part of the life I was beginning to rebuild. Saturday evening, Grace arrived at my house at 6 o'clock sharp. She was breathtaking, standing about 5'9" with long blonde hair flowing in soft waves. She was an image of grace. Her red dress hugged her figure perfectly, and her smile seemed to beg for a kiss. Dinner on the deck, overlooking the ranch, was perfect. We shared a meal I had prepared, sipped wine, and spent hours talking, laughing and flirting. At one point, Grace leaned in close, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "If you don't take me to bed soon, cowboy," she said, her voice low and playful, "I might just explode." I didn't need to be told twice. With a grin, I scooped her up in my arms and carried her to the bedroom. We wasted no time shedding our clothes and indulging in the electric connection that had been building between us for weeks. That night, everything felt right, something I hadn't experienced in years. Over the following weeks, Grace and I grew even closer. She stayed at my place more often than not, and while I suggested she move in, she preferred to wait until the divorce was officially finalized. Still, Grace often spent the night in my bed, and as the days passed, I found myself thinking more and more about the future we could build together. 5 days before the divorce was official, Luke called with an update. "Jack, we're about to make our move on Mitchell. Everything he owns is getting seized. We've got the evidence we need to nail him." "What about Sarah?" I asked, not out of any lingering concern, but more out of curiosity. "She'll be questioned, but it looks like she's in the clear for now," Luke said. "That said, her financial support is gone. She's in for a rough ride." "That's her problem now," I said, shrugging off whatever sympathy I might have had left. "I'm done with her." Luke chuckled. "Jack, I've got to tell you, Grace is thrilled about you. She was devastated after her divorce, but you've really brought her back to life. Any chance I'll be calling you my brother-in-law soon?" I didn't hesitate. "I hope so," I admitted, a smile tugging at my lips. "It depends on whether she wants me to. But I'll tell you this. I've fallen in love with your sister." "She loves you too, Jack," Luke said, a knowing tone in his voice. "I'll keep you posted on Mitchell. But don't be surprised if Sarah reaches out." Friday marked the official end of my marriage to Sarah. As I drove home from work, I stopped at a convenience store for beer, ready to spend a quiet evening with Grace. But fate had other plans. Sarah called. "I need to see you, Jack," she said, her voice tinged with desperation. I agreed to meet her for lunch the next day. When I mentioned it to Grace, she declined to join. "I trust you to handle it," she said, brushing off the situation. We were busy moving her things into my place anyway, as we both prepared for the next chapter together. Sarah and I met at a downtown restaurant. When I saw her, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked worn, like she'd been carrying a weight for months, and heavier than before. The media had been ruthless, linking her to Mitchell as his mistress. Public scrutiny had clearly taken its toll. People stared as she entered, and I suggested we sit outside for some privacy. We started with small talk, but it wasn't long before Sarah broke down, her voice trembling. "Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life," she said, the words falling from her like a confession. "I realized it just a few weeks after moving in with Benjamin. At first it was exciting, but the money, it didn't mean anything. I was miserable, Jack." Her tears didn't stir the sympathy I once might have had. Still, I let her speak. "I thought money was everything, but I see now how wrong I was. I've been sick with guilt over what I did to you and Mia. She barely speaks to me anymore. You didn't deserve any of it. You were a good husband, a good provider." I listened, my emotions carefully held in check. "Thank you for saying that, Sarah," I said quietly. "But the truth is, you weren't happy with me. If you had been, you wouldn't have left." Tears streamed down her face. "I was happy with you, Jack. Benjamin manipulated me. He seduced me with promises of wealth and convinced me to leave. The night before his arrest, he forced himself on me." She choked on the words. "He's a disgusting man, and I hope he rots in jail." Her words, while heartbreaking, didn't stir the sympathy I thought I might feel. "Sarah, where's this going?" I asked, my voice firm but calm. "What do you want from me?" "I want you back, Jack," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I miss you. I miss our life, the ranch, everything." I shook my head, my tone unyielding. "When you left, I told you it was final. There's no going back, Sarah. I've moved on. I'm in love with someone else." Sarah's face crumpled, her body shaking with grief. "I was foolish to hope," she whispered. Can you at least help me? I'm broke. I have nowhere to go. How much do you need? I asked, my tone flat, resigned. 5,000, she said quietly. I'll pay you back once I get a job. I wrote her a check and handed it over. This will help you start over, I said, my voice distant. I wish you the best, Sarah. As I left the restaurant, I placed a $100 bill on the table for the bill and tip, not looking back. I didn't need to see her face when she unfolded the check. The look of disbelief, followed by the slow dawning of regret, was enough to know this was truly the end. Grace moved in shortly after. We made it official in the spring with a small, intimate ceremony in Vegas. Luke was my best man, and Mia, now as close to Grace as she had been to me, was the maid of honor. The wedding was simple but filled with love. Afterward, we celebrated in our honeymoon suite, with only close friends and family present. Fate seemed to smile on us that weekend. I hit a progressive jackpot at the casino, walking away with over $200,000. A stroke of luck that felt like a sign of the fresh start Grace and I were making together. As for Sarah, she eventually found a job and a place to live, but she never repaid the loan I'd given her. I didn't expect her to. Rumor had it she was dating a high school English teacher now. I couldn't help but hope that whatever relationship she was in would bring her the peace she was searching for. Meanwhile, Benjamin Mitchell was convicted of fraud. His assets were seized, and he was sentenced to a federal prison cell. I couldn't help but wonder if, in some strange twist of fate, he had found companionship better suited to his taste there.